Ever wondered why iconic 80s gadgets like reel-to-reel tape recorders disappeared? From cutting-edge tech to nostalgic relics, these devices were once must-haves. But there's one surprising reason they vanished. Stay tuned to discover what led to their ultimate decline. Portable cassette player, Walkman. Remember the thrill of hearing your favorite mixtape through those iconic orange foam headphones? The Walkman wasn't just a gadget, it revolutionized how we experienced music. Introduced by Sony in 1979, this portable cassette player let us carry our tunes everywhere, on long bus rides, park jogs, or just chilling in our rooms. Mixtapes became a personal art form, a way to express feelings, and the click of a cassette being inserted brought a satisfaction digital playlists can't replicate. But as CDs and MP3 players took over, the Walkman faded into a beloved memory, symbolizing a time when music was something you could hold in your hand. The 80s weren't just about portable music though. While some were glued to their Walkmans, others were sinking into something far more unusual at home. Ever wonder what it was like to sleep on a bed that could spring a leak? Enter the rise and fall of the waterbed. Waterbeds. Ah, the waterbed, the ultimate symbol of 80s cool. These liquid-filled mattresses promised a unique sleeping experience that combined comfort with a bit of a thrill. At their peak, waterbeds made up 20% of the US mattress market, especially popular among bachelors who wanted to add a touch of luxury to their bedrooms. You could adjust the firmness, and some even came with heating options for those chilly nights. But as cool as they were, waterbeds were also heavy, difficult to move, and always carried the risk of springing a leak. As mattress technology advanced, offering comfort without the hassle, waterbeds became a quirky relic of the past, a novelty item rather than a staple of bedroom decor. So, do you think the waterbed could ever make a comeback? Trapper Keepers. Do you remember when school supplies were as cool as the Trapper Keeper? With its bright colors, Velcro closures, and endless customization options, the Trapper Keeper wasn't just a binder, it was a statement. Kids proudly flaunted theirs, adorned with pictures of kittens, race cars, or unicorns, each reflecting their personality. It was more than just an organizer, it was a status symbol in school hallways. But as schools transitioned to laptops and digital assignments, the need for physical binders dwindled. Yet, the Trapper Keeper remains a nostalgic reminder of a time when staying organized was as simple as flipping open a Velcro flap. But organizing wasn't just about keeping papers in order. Imagine tracking down a friend or a local business without a quick Google search. How did we manage? Stay tuned as we flip through the pages of history to explore the iconic phone book. Phone books. Remember when finding a phone number meant flipping through pages instead of tapping a screen? Before the internet put everything at our fingertips, we had phone books, the analog Google. These hefty tomes, divided into the white pages for residential numbers and the yellow pages for business listings, were a staple in every home. Need a plumber? Flip through the yellow pages. Want to call your neighbor? Check the white pages. They were so common that the phrase, "let your fingers do the walking," became part of the culture. But as the digital age dawned, these once indispensable books became obsolete, replaced by search engines and smartphones. Now, the only place you're likely to see a phone book is as a doorstop or in an old TV show. But do you ever miss the days when information was just a page away? Video rentals. Do you remember when movie night meant more than just picking a title and pressing play? Video rental stores were the heart of weekend entertainment, where families and friends gathered to choose movies for the night. Each trip was an adventure, browsing aisles of colorful VHS covers, debating whether to watch an action flick, comedy, or horror movie. And don't forget the pressure to rewind the tape before returning it to avoid late fees. These stores were more than rental hubs. They were community spaces where movie lovers shared recommendations and discovered new favorites. Though streaming has replaced them, the experience of browsing those shelves remains a cherished memory. And speaking of VHS tapes, do you recall the thrill of popping in a fresh tape, adjusting the tracking, and hoping for perfect video quality? Let's dive into how these clunky cassettes revolutionized home entertainment. VHS and VCRs. Before streaming made movies instantly accessible, there were VHS tapes and VCRs. These clunky plastic rectangles were the gateway to home entertainment. The thrill of visiting a video rental store, browsing for the perfect weekend flick, and hoping the latest release wasn't already rented out defined the VHS era. VCRs were revolutionary, letting us record TV shows and home videos, preserving memories on tape. And who could forget the golden rule? Be kind, rewind. As DVDs and streaming services emerged, VHS tapes and VCRs were relegated to dusty attics. But for those who grew up in the 80s and 90s, the sound of a tape clicking into place remains a sweet memory. But what about those small, square pieces of plastic that held your digital world? Stick around as we explore the rise and fall of floppy disks, the original save icon. Do you remember the days when saving a file meant inserting a floppy disk? Floppy disks. Do you remember when saving a file meant sliding a square piece of plastic into your computer? Long before cloud storage and USB drives, floppy disks were the go-to method for storing and transferring files. These small square disks could hold a whopping 1.44 megabytes of data, enough for school assignments, family photos, or your first coding project. The iconic sound of the floppy drive reading the disk was music to the ears of 80s and 90s tech enthusiasts. But as technology advanced and file sizes grew, floppy disks became obsolete, replaced by CDs, USB drives, and now cloud storage. Yet the floppy disk lives on as the save icon, a nostalgic nod to its pioneering days. And speaking of tech relics, remember when staying connected on the go meant carrying a pager? Let's explore how these little beeping devices were once the lifeline of communication before smartphones took over. Pagers. Before the omnipresence of smartphones, there were pagers, the little devices that kept us connected in the 80s and 90s. With a beep and a tiny screen displaying a number to call back, pagers were essential for anyone who needed to be reachable at all times. Doctors, emergency workers, and even teenagers used them to stay in the loop. There was even a shorthand language developed, using numbers to spell out words, a precursor to today's texting slang. But as mobile phones became more affordable and widespread, the pager's days were numbered. While they're mostly a thing of the past now, pagers were a crucial stepping stone in the evolution of mobile communication. So, do you think there's still a place for pagers in today's hyper-connected world? Fax machines. Remember when sending a document across the world in minutes felt like a technological marvel? Fax machines were once cutting-edge technology, allowing businesses to do just that. In the 80s and 90s, the sound of a fax machine connecting, a mix of beeps and static, was a common noise in offices. Whether sending contracts, orders, or important memos, fax machines were the backbone of business communication. But with the rise of email and digital signatures, faxing rapidly declined. Today, fax machines are mostly obsolete, though some industries still rely on them for security. For those who worked in an office during their heyday, fax machines are a nostalgic reminder of the early days of digital communication. But what if I told you that wasn't the only noisy office equipment of the era? Stick around as we take a look at the dot matrix printer, a device that was as loud as it was essential. Dot matrix printers. Remember the days when printing a document meant enduring the clatter of a dot matrix printer? In the early days of home and office computing, dot matrix printers were the go-to option for printing documents. These noisy, mechanical devices worked by striking an ink-soaked ribbon against paper, creating characters and images out of tiny dots. Dot matrix printers were especially beloved in business settings for their ability to print multiple carbon copies at once, a feature that modern printers can't replicate. But as inkjet and laser printers became more affordable and offered sharper print quality, dot matrix printers became less common. Today, they're mostly found in niche applications, but their distinct, perforated paper and clattering print heads still evoke a sense of nostalgia for those who remember the early days of personal computing. So, do you think any modern technology will inspire the same kind of nostalgia years from now? Arcades. Before gaming consoles brought the arcade experience home, there were the arcades themselves. Neon-lit wonderlands filled with the sights and sounds of 80s pop culture. Whether you were challenging a friend to a round of Street Fighter or trying to beat your high score in Pac-Man, arcades were the place to be. The clink of quarters, the flashing lights, and the cheers of players crowding around a particularly intense game all added to the electric atmosphere. Arcades weren't just about gaming, they were social hubs where rivalries were formed and friendships were forged. But as home gaming systems advanced, offering the same excitement without the need for quarters, arcades slowly faded away. Yet, for many, the thrill of seeing their initials at the top of a leaderboard will always be unmatched. But what happened when the games ended and it was time to make a call? Stay tuned as we step into a phone booth and reminisce about the days when payphones were our lifeline to the outside world. Payphones. Remember when making a call away from home meant searching for the nearest payphone? Before cell phones became ubiquitous, payphones were the lifeline for staying connected. Found on nearly every street corner, in malls, and at bus stops, payphones were essential in an era when personal mobile phones were a luxury few could afford. Whether you were calling home for a ride, checking in with a friend, or even making an emergency call, finding a payphone was a relief. But as mobile phones became more accessible, payphones began to disappear. Today, they are rare, often seen as relics of a bygone era. Still, for those who remember dropping a coin into the slot and hearing that familiar dial tone, payphones will always be a symbol of a time when communication wasn't always in our pockets. So, do you ever wonder what future generations will think of the technology we rely on today? MTV. Remember when watching music meant tuning into MTV? Launched in 1981, MTV revolutionized the way we experienced music, turning songs into visual spectacles and musicians into superstars. With the iconic words, "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll," MTV brought music videos to the forefront, shaping pop culture and influencing fashion, attitudes, and even politics with its Rock the Vote campaign. From Michael Jackson's Thriller to Madonna's Like a Prayer, MTV was the heart of the music scene. But as the 90s turned into the 2000s, the channel shifted its focus to reality TV, and the once iconic music television became something entirely different. While MTV still exists, it's a shadow of its former self, remembered by those who grew up with it as the birthplace of modern music video culture. But what if I told you there was a time when planning a trip wasn't as simple as typing a destination into your phone? Stay tuned as we unfold the story of paper maps. Paper maps. Remember the days when planning a road trip meant unfolding a large, crinkly paper map? Before GPS and smartphones, these maps were essential for navigating the open road. They required skill to read and often led to spirited debates in the passenger seat about the best route to take. They offered a full view of your journey, giving you a sense of scale and direction that digital maps can't quite replicate. Family vacations often included bonding over map reading, with parents teaching their children how to navigate using landmarks and compass directions. But as GPS devices and navigation apps became common, the need for paper maps dwindled. Today, while some still appreciate them for their aesthetic or use them in areas where cell service is spotty, paper maps have mostly been replaced by the convenience of digital navigation. So, do you think we've lost something special in the switch from paper to pixels? Boomboxes. Remember when your music wasn't just for your ears, but for everyone around you? If the Walkman was personal, boomboxes were the opposite. Bold, loud, and designed to share your music with the world. These portable sound systems, often carried on shoulders, were a staple of 80s urban culture. With powerful speakers and a built-in cassette player, boomboxes provided the soundtrack for block parties, breakdancing battles, and street corners. The bigger the boombox, the more street cred you had. Despite their weight, people carried them everywhere, blasting their favorite tunes for all to hear. But as personal devices like the Walkman gained popularity and noise ordinances tightened, the boombox era came to an end. Today, Bluetooth speakers offer convenience, but they lack the bold cultural impact of the 80s boombox. And speaking of bold 80s statements, do you remember the fashion trend that made everyone look more powerful? Stick around as we dive into the era of shoulder pads. Shoulder pads. Nothing says 80s fashion quite like shoulder pads. These foam inserts were a defining feature of the decade's power dressing, giving both men and women a broad-shouldered, commanding silhouette. Inspired by the strong, authoritative looks of TV shows like Dynasty, shoulder pads were designed to make a statement, conveying confidence and power in the corporate world and beyond. They were everywhere, in blazers, dresses, and even casual tops. But as the 90s approached, fashion trends shifted towards more relaxed, natural silhouettes, and the exaggerated shoulders began to look out of place. While shoulder pads have made brief comebacks in fashion, they are mostly remembered as a hallmark of 80s style, when bigger was definitely better. But shoulder pads weren't the only thing from the 80s that embraced the bigger is better mantra. Ready to relive another iconic look? Let's talk about the era's sky-high, gravity-defying big hair next. Big hair. When it comes to 80s style, bigger was always better, especially when it came to hair. Whether you rocked a perm, a teased mane, or the latest mullet, big hair defined the decade. Achieving these gravity-defying styles required time, effort, and plenty of Aquanet hairspray. Both men and women embraced the trend, with rock bands and pop icons leading the way. Hair was teased, sprayed, and shaped into towering works of art that could withstand a windstorm. However, as the 90s ushered in grunge and minimalist styles, big hair began to deflate. While some elements of big hair have returned in fashion, nothing quite matches the volume and attitude of 80s hair. But what if I told you that capturing all that fabulous hair on video was just as important? Stay tuned as we rewind to the days of camcorders, when documenting life's moments required more than just pulling out your phone. Camcorders. Remember when capturing a family event meant lugging around a bulky camcorder? Before smartphones turned everyone into a videographer, camcorders were the device of choice for capturing home movies. These shoulder-mounted cameras allowed families to record birthdays, holidays, and every precious moment in between. Whether on VHS tapes or later, smaller formats like 8mm, camcorders democratized filmmaking, making it possible for anyone to create their own movies. They weren't just for home use. Citizen journalists and aspiring filmmakers also used camcorders to document events and tell stories. But as digital technology advanced and smartphones with high-quality cameras became the norm, camcorders faded from everyday use. Professional-grade video cameras still exist, but for most of us, the phone in our pocket has taken over the role of capturing our memories. Parachute pants. Do you remember the swish of nylon as you walked down the street? Parachute pants were the epitome of 80s fashion cool, combining style with a sense of adventure. Made from lightweight nylon, these pants were designed to swish as you walked, often featuring multiple zippers and pockets that added to their unique, futuristic look. Originally inspired by breakdancers who needed flexible, durable clothing, parachute pants quickly became a mainstream trend. They were tight-fitting, often brightly colored, and screamed 80s cool. But like many fashion fads, parachute pants were short-lived. By the 90s, they were seen as a dated relic of 80s style, a reminder of a time when fashion was bold, loud, and unapologetically different. So, could a bold trend like parachute pants ever make a comeback in today's fashion scene? Shopping malls. Do you remember when the shopping mall was more than just a place to buy things? In the 80s, malls were cultural hubs, social scenes, and a rite of passage for teenagers. They were where you hung out with friends, shopped for the latest fashion trends, caught a movie, or grabbed a bite in the food court. These climate-controlled havens offered everything under one roof, providing an escape from the outside world. Shopping malls even played starring roles in many 80s movies and TV shows, cementing their place in pop culture. However, with the rise of online shopping and changing consumer habits, malls began to decline. The COVID-19 pandemic only accelerated this trend, and while some malls have adapted, the era of the mall as the epicenter of American life is largely over. But what about office culture? Stick around as we dive into the Rolodex, a tool that was once the cornerstone of every office desk. Rolodex. Do you remember the satisfying click as you spun through your Rolodex to find that crucial contact? Once a staple on every office desk, the Rolodex was the ultimate tool for organizing contact information. Its rotating design made flipping through cards easy, allowing you to find the right contact in seconds. Whether you were a high-powered executive or a small business owner, the Rolodex was essential for managing professional relationships. Introduced in the 1950s, the Rolodex revolutionized how people tracked their networks. It wasn't just practical, it symbolized organization and efficiency in the workplace. The tactile experience of writing out a contact's details and filing it was oddly satisfying. However, as digital systems and smartphones emerged, the Rolodex became obsolete, replaced by more efficient technologies. Today, it's a nostalgic reminder of a more hands-on, personalized approach to networking. Do you still miss flipping through a Rolodex? Cathode ray tube, CRT, televisions. CRT televisions were the centerpiece of home entertainment in the 80s. These bulky, heavy sets delivered the shows and movies that defined the decade, from Saturday morning cartoons to primetime dramas. Despite their size, CRT TVs were a marvel of technology at the time, offering hours of entertainment to families gathered around their screens. The vibrant colors and characteristic hum of the tube as it warmed up were familiar parts of daily life. However, As flat-screen LCD and LED TVs became more affordable and offered superior picture quality, CRTs were phased out, now serving mostly as nostalgic reminders of simpler viewing experiences. But as we swap out our old TVs for sleek new models, let's not forget another bedroom staple of the past. Remember the days when waking up didn't involve a smartphone? Stay tuned as we wind back the clock and take a look at the humble analog alarm clock. Analog alarm clocks. Remember when waking up meant hearing the jarring ring of an analog alarm clock? Before smartphones, analog alarm clocks were bedside essentials, with loud mechanical bells or gentle ticking sounds that started your day. These clocks came in various styles, from the classic twin bell design that jolted you awake to modern digital versions with glowing red numbers that appeared toward the decade's end. Analog clocks weren't just functional, they reflected personal style. Some preferred sleek minimalist designs, while others opted for quirky character-themed clocks that added personality to their nightstands. Setting the alarm required effort, twisting dials or pushing buttons, but the simplicity was satisfying. As mobile phones with built-in alarms became common, analog clocks were largely retired, now serving as decorative pieces or collecting dust, a nostalgic reminder of when mornings were more analog. Do you miss waking up to the sound of an analog alarm clock? Physical encyclopedias. Remember when learning about the world meant diving into a heavy book instead of typing a search query? Before the internet, physical encyclopedias were the go-to resource for information. These multi-volume sets covered topics from science to history and were staples in homes and libraries. Parents often invested in encyclopedias to aid their children with school projects and general learning. Each heavy volume was a treasure trove of knowledge, and flipping through the pages was a journey of discovery, with detailed articles, maps, and illustrations. However, with the advent of the internet, search engines, and resources like Wikipedia, physical encyclopedias became obsolete. Once symbols of intellectual curiosity, they are now seen as artifacts of a pre-digital age. But what if I told you that wasn't the only bulky technology left behind? Stay tuned as we rewind to the era of reel-to-reel tape recorders, a must-have for serious audiophiles and recording enthusiasts. Reel-to-reel tape recorders. Do you remember the days when recording high-quality audio meant threading tape through a reel-to-reel machine? Reel-to-reel tape recorders were the pinnacle of audio recording technology in the 80s, used by professionals and serious audiophiles alike. These machines allowed for high-quality sound recording, making them a staple in radio stations, recording studios, and the homes of audio enthusiasts. The large reels and visible tape made the recording process feel almost magical as you watched the reels spin while capturing or playing back sound. But as digital recording technologies advanced, offering more convenience and better quality, reel-to-reel tape recorders became less common. Today, they are prized by collectors and audiophiles who appreciate the analog sound quality and nostalgia of these once cutting-edge devices. So, could the warm, rich sound of reel-to-reel ever inspire a new generation of audiophiles to revive this vintage technology? Polaroid cameras. Do you remember the thrill of watching a photo develop right before your eyes? Polaroid cameras were a game changer, offering instant gratification long before digital cameras. With a simple click and a few moments of waiting, you could hold a freshly developed photo in your hands. This instant photography became a hit at parties, events, and family gatherings, capturing memories in a tangible form. Polaroid photos, with their square shape and white borders, became unique keepsakes. The magic wasn't just in the image, but in the experience of waiting for the picture to gradually emerge, making each shot one of a kind, with no option to delete or retake. Beloved by artists and creatives for fashion shoots and experimental art, Polaroid cameras faded as digital photography took over. However, they've seen a nostalgic resurgence, embraced by those who appreciate the tactile nature and instant charm of analog photography. 8-track tapes. Do you remember when 8-track tapes were the go-to way to listen to music? Though they peaked in the 70s, these bulky cartridges were still popular in the early 80s, bringing music to cars and homes. Their unique design allowed listeners to enjoy albums without flipping a tape, making them a convenient option for music lovers. However, as technology advanced, 8-tracks were gradually replaced by more compact and versatile cassette tapes, and eventually CDs, which offered better sound quality and portability. Despite their decline, 8-track tapes hold a special place in the history of audio formats, remembered fondly by those who experienced their heyday. So, do you miss the days of popping an 8-track into your player and cruising to your favorite tunes? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this nostalgic trip, like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.